A Ukrainian counteroffensive in Toretsk, the German government to invest close to $1 trillion in defense and infrastructure, and the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy being thrown out of the White House. We'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Surfshark VPN is sponsoring this channel for this month. If you want to bypass geo-blocking or hide your internet activity all with a convenient app, then use Surfshark VPN for just $2.09 a month by using my link. You get 4 months extra as well. Thank you, Surfshark, for sponsoring this channel. The Russian attacks on the Ukrainian infrastructure and civilian as well as military targets continue. Basically, every day, the attacks in Shahids alone are between 150 and over 200 drones. We'll switch to the developments along the front line, and there actually not that much has happened over big parts of the front line. I cannot really confirm anything having changed in Kursk. Nothing that I can confirm about Kharkiv. On the Eastern Front, the Ukrainians claim they managed to push the Russians somewhat back northeast of Kupiansk. I have no visual confirmation of this yet, so I cannot confirm it yet. Other than that, the first change I actually have is from Toretsk. And here in Toretsk, we have geolocations of the Ukrainians in the center of Toretsk itself. This here and this are geolocations of Ukrainian positions. I talked to Audax, who is one of the specialists for that region. That is, he's also quoted by a lot of sources, a lot of think tanks about his geolocations, and he thinks that this is actually not a full-blown counteroffensive because he has not seen any conclusive evidence that those two buildings, this one here as well as this one, were ever in Russian hands. He thinks there is continuous Ukrainian presence inside of these buildings, deep inside of Toretsk itself. We also have fresh geolocations of the Ukrainians being here at the mine, so south of the high rises as well. All of this is showing that the Ukrainian accounts are talking about a counteroffensive, but there is no proof that this was actually freshly taken territory, which in total gives us an overview of the more or less a confirmation of the deep state map that is very confusing at this point here. We also have further geolocations, not just at this point, but we also have the Ukrainians at the southern part of Toretsk itself, showing that the Ukrainians are active. But as said, like, while we see them at fresh positions, a specialist focusing on the area confirms that the Ukrainians are there, but he cannot sign off that this is a fresh counteroffensive. It might just be that the Ukrainians have been there all the time. Interesting too is that the Russian mill blogger Rebar is talking that Toretsk is basically a big gray zone, as the movement of personnel and material is impossible because of Ukrainian drones. So we have areas where now and then you find Russian soldiers that have been killed in geolocations indicating where the Russians have been, but there is little proof that they actually consolidated their control over this. So while we have geolocations all over the area of Russian presence, this does not conclude a full Russian control over the area, meaning that this weird looking map from Deep State map might actually be close to the truth. We switch to the area of Pokrovsk, and here we have the Ukrainians in Kotlyne. We have a geolocation of this here. Here, the Ukrainians were pushing down, doing a counterattack in this direction and taking a Russian position and taking prisoners of war. And the Russians themselves have reached the western outskirts of are now west of Nadezhdinka here at this point, meaning they have advanced from this here up to this point lately. As you can hear, I'm still pretty sick, so if I'm a little bit confused now and then in between, I apologize already. I'm suffering from quite the flu. We move to the area of Kurachove, and here we have two geolocations from Andrivka. Here we have the Russians in the west of Andrivka, as you can see here, and they are also in the north of it, showing that Andrivka has mostly fallen. Again, not conclusive yet that there is no longer Ukrainian presence anywhere, but we see that the Russians have reached the outskirts in every part, indicating that at least the Ukrainian control is no longer solid. The Russians also managed to completely collapse the pocket east of Constantinople. They've straightened out the front line here in this region, and that means that with the capture of Andrivka, they could now advance further west along the main road, but we'll have to see how their future operations are going to happen here. Now we switch to the oblast border, close to Velika Novosilka. Here we have the Russians in Dnipro Energia, up here. The Russians have reached this town. We have a geolocation of this here, that they are inside of the town, and over the past few days they gained significant area. Roughly this year has all fallen to the Russians over the past few days, including the town of Burlatske. There the Russians now have regained their momentum after the capture of Velika Novosilka. They are continuing to advance to the northwest. Then we have the another geolocation from close to the former Kakhovka reservoir. This is from Piatikhatki. And here we have the Russians being confirmed in two positions inside of Piatikhatki. This town was recaptured by the Ukrainians in their summer offensive in 2023. And now the Russians seem to have recaptured the town. We see that it's still being seen here as under Ukrainian control, but the fresh geolocations say otherwise. So at the very least, this must be a contested area now if it hasn't fallen to the Russians by now. That was it with the movements along the front line. We have overall the information. The South Koreans are saying the Russians sent another 1,000 to 3,000 additional soldiers to Kursk to assist the Ukrainians, to assist the Russians. But obviously the biggest news that needs to be discussed is the event from the White House. Now, in this part, I would like you to listen to me completely, because it is easy to misunderstand what I'm saying, because I will start off with the fact that I think the mistake was on Zelensky's team, but not in the way you might think I insinuate. Usually diplomatic missions have some kind of cultural education. So, for instance, do not offer wine in the state dinner with a Muslim ruler. Do not give your hand towards the Muslim woman. In this case, Zelensky was clearly not briefed that he's not visiting a Western president in the White House, but that he's visiting an imperial house of the 19th century. And that he has to be acting accordingly. I'm already saying this for at least a couple of weeks, that Trump apparently has changed the foreign policy. Not only has he ended the world order after the Second World War, he has moved to a foreign policy that is not appropriate, that is not equivalent to anything we've recently seen, but that is something very equivalent to something we have seen quite a while ago, and I compared it to imperial households in the 19th century. In this case, Zelensky expected to meet somebody at eye level, and he didn't understand that he was a beggar, somebody to ask for aid at the imperial household. Instead of complimenting Trump from beginning to end, to praise him for delivering Javelin while Obama had only sent sleeping bags, to emphasize how much Ukraine owes Trump, that Trump is the biggest friend of all the Ukrainians, that they will never forget how much he has helped them by delivering Javelin in his first period of being a president. He dared to contradict, he dared to voice demands in public, and he dared to contradict J.D. Vance. He has ignored that Trump wants to reach peace by creating pressure on Ukrainian side. This led to a complete loss of control in this situation, as there was no trust between the two parties and no sympathy between the two parties either. Instead, Trump is likely giving blame to Zelensky for the impeachment in 2019. And he's saying that he Putin went with Trump through the Russia hoax. Like Putin suffered from it as well, like I did, the Russia hoax. Trump is basically calling Putin a comrade in pain, somebody who suffered together with him. Zelenskyy, on the other hand, is the one who he likely blames for the 2019 impeachment. Zelenskyy thus hasn't acted like a beggar, somebody who's on his knees asking the imperial household, asking the emperor for his mercy, but he showed self-confidence in front of Vance and Trump, which was not appreciated. He contradicted, he demanded, and that led to an escalation that especially J.D. Vance was happy to start and happy to follow through. This was either planned, but that seems unlikely, as initially Trump is quite conciliatory. If you watch the full 50 minutes, you will likely agree with us, but it's possible. I read the theory that J.D. Vance might have been in the room to basically end anything at a good opportunity, so Trump doesn't have to be the one saying it, but this is obviously just speculation as of now. But if we look at the facts, Trump's attempts to achieve peace do not include any pressure towards Moscow. They do not. Instead, we could argue this might have come at a later point after the agreement about the resources has been signed. But so far, it feels like he's mostly putting pressure on the weaker party to give in to achieve a quick peace. That's obviously far easier from his mind to push the weak party further down instead of leveling the field and thus pushing the Russians down and lifting the Ukrainians at the same time. From Russia, from Moscow, the maximum requirements, the maximum demands are still continuing. Russia has not given in one iota so far in its demand, and Trump himself is emphasizing that no side. Trump is emphasizing that no side would vote. I'm sorry, he's emphasizing that he is outside of both sides. So he tries to be neutral, thus he's not taking sides with anything, which means that he's making an equivalence between the invaded party and the invader. He tries to be off the balance, and he even complained about the hostility that Zelenskyy was showing towards Putin. He wants just peace, like he said, regarding the question of guilt, and this also led to the Kremlin praising the US government. His hope and the hope of his allies that this might lead to Zelenskyy being deposed, at least for the moment, seems to be completely failing. Poroshenko and Salushny, both the likely candidates to fight Zelenskyy in a new election, and both that might have a chance to win against him, are demonstrating solidarity with Zelenskyy and are backing him up at this point. Also important about this whole event was that Trump twice said you are gambling with World War III, proving that he himself is being impressed by the nuclear threats by the Russians as well. And in total, it shows that Trump is seeing the world politics like an imperial court in the 19th century. He sees in equal level are 3 to 5 other world powers. Then there might be a few minor powers that have to be considered. If we take the analog, so you have the big powers, Germany, France, Great Britain, and Russia, and then you have the bigger, smaller powers of Italy, of Austria-Hungary, and maybe of the Ottoman Empire, and the rest should be happy if they are not being rolled over, if they are not being annexed, something like this. So there is no equivalence in his view. Ukraine is not an equal partner. They have to be they have to show their deference towards the United States, towards him. And as Zelenskyy was not expecting this, as Zelenskyy was not briefed that this is what is to be expected from him, it ended the way we all knew. He now published on Truth Social a quote apparently by someone that Zelenskyy will have no choice but to do what Trump wanted because Trump's plan is so fantastic and Trump thinks 10 steps ahead. And in the end, it's basically Trump is playing chess where everyone else is playing checkers. We'll have to see how this turns out. In Europe, there are already a lot of movements in this regard. Europe is mostly outraged. The fact that J.D. Vance insisted on not saying thanks ignoring that the US had given their word in the Budapest Memorandum, where Ukraine handed over thousands of nuclear warheads for guarantees by the United States as well for their territorial independence. The US acting like everyone owes them something, while dozens of nations have sent soldiers in 2 American wars in Afghanistan and in Iraq and lost soldiers. Germany lost over 60 soldiers in Afghanistan. They were being sent home in coffins in a war for the US, and apparently the new government thinks that the rest of the world has to stand straight and do whatever they want, and this is leading to political reactions. And one of this is what is happening in Germany right now. The 2 likely next parties of the government are currently negotiating about doing an exceptional debt taking. The German constitution forbids debts after, I think, 0.5% of GDP every year, some small number like this. But if you have a majority, a super majority, you can increase this. And as the next parliament will have a minority that can block everything out of 2 Russia-friendly parties, they're currently negotiating to take debt in an insane amount. The talking points are right now 400 billion for national defense and another 400 to 500 billion for infrastructure. So in total, the German government will likely take debt of almost €1 trillion to pay for national defense and for infrastructure. And that will include not only the strengthening of Europeans' defense, of Germany's defense, but also include aid for the Ukrainian side. And this is happening throughout of Europe now. And in the long term, this will cause obviously problems for the US, as the US has demonstrated now over the past few days that they are no longer a reliable partner. Trump has shown to be more an ally of Russia than of the rest of NATO, and this will have its consequences whether the Americans like it or not. Treating allies like this will have its consequences. Anyways, that was it from me for today. I'm sorry for my voice. I'm still kind of sick. But if you enjoyed today's situation report, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment what you think about the current developments. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by the means in the description. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.